Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Triangulation is brought to you by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Triangulation, episode 107, recorded June 12th, 2013. Poet Philosopher, Jason Silva. Triangulation is brought to you by Audible.com. To download a free audiobook of your choice, visit audiblepodcast.com/triangulation. It's time for Triangulation, the show where we get great minds and get a chance to spend some time with them, ask them questions, learn a little bit. And I am thrilled to have the host of National Geographic's Brain Games on with us right now, Jason Silva. Jason, it's good to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you. How's it going?
I'm great. He is I like your self-described, you're an epiphany addict.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually, it's not an exaggeration. I think since I was a little kid, you know, I just kind of had a lot of existential angst, and I needed to find inspiration as kind of like the antidote to that. As long as I was like uplifted by something, as long as I felt connected to something greater than me in some capacity, it offered a kind of respite from the anxiety of the human condition.
I like that. And what I really like is this notion that you have, and if we can, John, if you can get the Radical Openness video up, I'd like to show that too. He made it for TED Global in 2012. The notion that it's not unique to you, Rich. I think Richard Dawson said this, certainly Ray Kurzweil, that evolution of our bodies might have ended, but our evolution continues with our ideas. Our ideas are the new replicating machine.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I became obsessed with this notion. I read this essay called "What is a Meme" that was published in the Smithsonian. Okay, you're going to play it?
Yeah, let's play it, and then you can explain it. Here we go.
Sure.
You know, I love this idea of radical openness, the free exchange of information, the free flow of ideas, creating spaces in which ideas can have sex, as Matt Ridley talks about. And this is huge because it turns out that ideas are just as real as the neurons they inhabit, as James Gleick tells us. You know, a new kingdom rises above the biosphere. The denizens of this kingdom are ideas, because ideas have retained some of the properties of organisms, it turns out. They leap from brain to brain. They compete for the limited resources of our attention. They have infectivity. They have spreading power. They are what Richard Dawkins calls the new replicators, born from the primordial soup of human culture. Their vector of transmission is language and electronic communications. And though ideas are not made of nucleic acid, they have achieved more evolutionary change, and at a rate that leaves the old gene panting far behind. You know, Ray Kurzweil says our ability to create virtual models in our heads, combined with our modest-looking thumbs, was sufficient to usher in the secondary force of evolution called technology. And it will continue until the entire universe is at our fingertips. This is unbelievable stuff. It speaks to the telescoping nature of evolutionary change. More change in the last 100 years than in the last billion years. Terence McKenna actually wrote that from the moment that human beings invented language, biological evolution essentially ceased, and evolution became a cultural epigenetic phenomenon. Now, we take in matter of low organization, we put it through our mental filters, and we extrude it in the form of space shuttles and iPhones. You know, the imaginary foundation tells us that what imagination does is it allows us to conceive of delightful future possibilities, pick the most amazing one, and pull the present forward to meet it. You know, imagine how impoverished this world would have been if we hadn't invented the technology of the oil painting in time for Van Gogh, or the technology of the musical instrument in time for Beethoven and Mozart to unfurl through it. You know, with the revolutions in biotechnology, nanotechnology, the free exchange of information is allowing us to conceive of radical new things. Freeman Dyson says in the future, new generation of artists will be writing genomes with the fluency that Blake and Byron wrote verses. What is great in man, said Nietzsche, is that he is a bridge and not an end. You know, we're on a trajectory smack in the middle between the born and the made, wrote Kevin Kelly. And so radical openness, it's huge. It's a universe of possibility. It's gray infused by color. It's the invisible revealed. It's the mundane blown away by awe. We need to cultivate radical openness as a way of participating and accelerating evolution. Wow.
Wow.
I kind of blew my own mind on that.
That was an epiphany.
Yeah,
but
totally.
you know, anybody who lives at this point in the 21st century, I think we're riding that rocket. It's very clear that we're riding that rocket of technology.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's clear, but it's not clear to a lot of people. I think that one of the things that happens is that, you know, when you're surrounded by something, it just becomes the normal and you no longer see it. You know, Stephen Johnson talks about the importance of pulling yourself out of context so that you can see the big picture and you can see the patterns. You know, Isaiah Berlin said to understand is to perceive patterns. And most people don't have the ability to do that. You know, how do we force ourselves to pull ourselves so radically out of context in order to gawk in amazement that those ubiquitous everyday wonders we're culturally disposed to ignore, as Tom Robbins says. I mean, that is really the problem. You know, isn't it the Wordsworth poem that says we have eyes yet see not, ears that hear not, and hearts that neither feel nor understand? I think that's what happens. I think most people are not aware of what is unfolding before them on the back of these exponentially emerging technologies. There's the literalization of the psychedelic dream of mind expansion is now happening with technologies. They are our ideas made manifest. And the fact that most people don't understand that, I think, is a problem, and it's a reason that I make these videos. If I can infect people with this kind of digital trip, so to speak, when they watch it, then maybe they look at the world a little bit differently afterwards.
It may be self-defense, though, because I think if you live in a state of wonder, which you would if you really could, see all this stuff that's happening around you.
100%.
It's hard to get anything done. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that what you just said is spot on. I mean, it's like Henry Miller says, even a blade of grass, when given proper attention, becomes a magnificent world in itself. But you know, you cleanse those doors of perception, you could be overwhelmed. I mean, at any given time, how are you going to cross the street? How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to do the day-to-day banalities of everyday life if you're sitting in a state of perpetual astonishment?
Yeah.
The truth is you can't. But I think increasingly powerful tools are helping us dovetail those lower level banal needs. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs is being distributed now with technology. So I don't have to, you don't want to deal with like paperwork and like bills and like stupid day-to-day things like that. You want to be like staring upon the universe and like thinking about Mars and thinking about like nanotech.
Yeah,
At least that's what I want to be
live
doing.
actualized, not in survival.
Yeah, exactly. We want to, free up our mental resources to contemplate on bigger things, right?
But I think I love when you talk about openness, because I think there is somewhat of a battle going on and it's probably among those who have made it, the incumbents, who want to hold on to what they got and not let anything out. I got patents, I got trademarks, I got lawyers, and you can't touch what I've got, I've locked it up, versus people like you, and I would put myself in this category, who completely support the notion of radical openness. That's the only way these ideas can build upon one another.
Yeah.
Sir Isaac Newton said, if I've seen farther than others, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of geniuses. Without those geniuses, you don't see farther.
Totally. I mean, if we're not allowed to remix and mash up, the ideas that came before us, nothing would emerge. There is no such thing as an original idea, is something that you hear about a lot. Everything is a remix of everything else. Everything is a remix. I don't know if you've seen that series on the web, which is great.
Well, but Walt Disney, who took every one of Brother Grimm's stories and then said, and by the way, they're copyrighted. It's exactly what you don't want. You want to be able to build upon that. There should be Mickey Mouse fan fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Yes.
I mean, the whole idea is that we have to be open to being remixed. I mean, where do we get? We get inspiration from somewhere. Inspiration, the Greek root of the word is to breathe in, to take in. So that means we got to be, we got to be able to take and borrow and mash up and remix. I totally agree with you. But I think that what happens is, those that have been successful in any capacity, those that have innovated and have found themselves in this wonderful situation with, business models that work for them that they don't want to disrupt. I can understand that as perhaps a consequence of not thinking exponentially.
Right.
So even though they benefited from exponential progress to create the empires that exist today across all these different industries, those people still have linear local brains, and they fail to think abundantly. They fail to think exponentially. And I think that Peter Diamandis' book on abundance is kind of a great an instruction manual for thinking in abundance. There's this idea that the whole notion of scarcity, the whole notion of I got to hold on to it because it's scarce and I got to monetize it. Scarcity, as Diamandis writes, is contextual, and technology is a resource liberating mechanism. Something is only scarce until you create the technology that makes it into something abundant. People talk about energy. Man, the sun sends us 10,000 times more energy than we need. People talk about water wars. We live on a water planet. Desalinization technology takes care of that. I mean, across the board, you have all these ways in which, you know, the technological innovation takes the issue of scarcity and spins it on its head and shows us, you know, everything is made of atoms. Particularly with the full flourishing of nanotechnology, we can turn anything into anything. So the whole thing about scarcity, purely contextual, purely a problem of perspective.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you're pretty optimistic. You don't worry about the powers that be holding on to stuff so tight that we can't go forward.
Well, look, they always have tried to do it. Yeah. It's just the nature of the beast in a way. But, you know, I think Kurzweil has these brilliant graphs that he uses in these talks, which he shows the progress of exponentials and exponential technology, no matter, you know, if through war, through famine, through conflict, through dictator, no matter what was going on in the world, the progress continued inexorably and always exponentially, which I think points to something slightly bigger than we are. And this is where I kind of take on the ideas of Kevin Kelly, who says that evolution itself is moving towards greater complexity no matter what, and that progress bootstraps on itself, and that technology is the seventh kingdom of life. He calls it the technium. And it's this idea that, like, it has its own needs and wants and is subject to evolutionary forces. So this idea that we're in control to begin with, you know, is again, a problem of perception, you know, because if you look at the whole thing, if you look at the ideas of Dawkins, that technology is our exoskeleton, there's a bunch of cognitive philosophers that have written about the extended mind thesis, this notion that technology is our second skin. It is our phenotype. You know, it's like the spider's web or like the termite's colony. It's a part of the species, even if it's not part of the biological skin bag. But nonetheless, this is just evolution in action. So I think it's great to have this conversation, but I think ultimately evolution plays out whether we want it to or not. So we might as well figure out how can we leverage it to maximize more possibilities in as many ways as possible.
So you do have some action items.
Some action items, like
do you?
My own action.
Yeah, what are the action items? Let's actualize it.
Well, look, the action items are that, you know, for example, a young person with a cell phone in Africa today has better communications technology than the U.S. president had 25 years ago.
That's true.
The smartphone in your pocket, you know, your iPhone, your Android phone, is 1,000,000 times cheaper, 1,000,000 times smaller, and 1,000 times more powerful than what used to be a $60 million supercomputer that was half a building in size 40 years ago.
And yet all we do is we play Angry Birds with it.
Well, some people do. Other people create amazing viral videos and try to promote amazing things. But my whole thing is, you know, my own efforts are to distill these big ideas, to distill these possibilities and put them out there in a way that is infectious and shareable. So I am leveraging the tools of the age. I'm leveraging social media. I'm leveraging the currency of inspiration. I'm leveraging the currency of ideas to try to spread this stuff, to make people excited, to change people's perspective, you know, but that's kind of my contribution, you know, to create ripples and pay it forward, you know.
Are you a missionary of ideas? Do you, actually, a better question, ideas in general, yes, but what about specific ideas? Are there any specific ideas that you would like to?
Well, look, I mean, I've always been a sort of philosophical thinker. I mean, my sensibilities are, you know, contemplative and philosophical. They always have been. I went to school for philosophy, so I'm into awe. I'm an awe junkie. I'm a wonder junkie, to coin Carl Sagan's term. And so I am interested in, you know, perspectives and ideas that propel us forward, or rather that accelerate our capacity to transcend our limits. Because in the face of being a mortal being, which is this affliction of human beings, we can contemplate our own mortality. We can also contemplate an infinite cosmos. That's a difficult thing to stomach. I don't know if you know the work of Ernest Becker. He wrote The Denial of Death, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book in 1974. But he basically said, you know, human beings have the capacity to ponder the infinite, yet they're housed in heart-pumping, breath-gasping, decaying bodies.
Right.
How do you deal with that? You either kill yourself in a pit of despair, or you decide, I'm going to not go quietly into that good night, but rage against the dying of the light, as Dylan Thomas would say. And I think the way that we rage against the dying of the light is with our creativity. It's with our tools. It's the ways in which we transcend our limits. As Kurzweil said, we didn't stay in the caves, we haven't stayed on the planet, and soon we won't stay with the limitations of our biology.
So we don't really need to worry about planning a direction. Just be creative.
Well, look, I mean, I think the whole idea of planning a direction,
Sounds like you can't.
Well, yeah, I'm interested in Stephen Johnson's notion in his book Future Perfect, and he talks about self-organizing systems and bottom-up systems and the power of peer networks, distributed peer networks that can be leveraged. You know, I think that, yes, it's good to have influencers and leaders at the top, and, you know, we can create, here's the idea of planning that I would say, I think it was Chris Anderson from TED when asked, what was the future of the conference? And he said, we think in compass, not roadmap. And so
we're going north.
Yeah, we lean into what's working, you know?
Right.
And we have tools that allow us to experiment. And if we're going to fail quickly and move on, right? Like, it's okay.
Right. You're doing a very successful series for National Geographic. Just completed the first season of Brain Games. People can take the illusion confusion test or challenge right now at braingames.nationalgeographic.com. Tell us a little bit about about this show. What is Brain Games all about?
Well, Brain Games it's a pop science series about the brain that essentially uses these kind of perceptual hacks, these kind of cognitive brain tricks and optical illusions and so on and so forth to create, I like to say, cracks in your perception of reality. So these games, so to speak, these visual games, which are adapted from actual brain lab experiments, are meant to highlight shortcomings in how your brain perceives reality.
None of these lines are parallel. You can't tell me those lines are parallel.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are pretty tricky. But again, I like to say, like, look, the games are fun, but the games are a means to an end. The main idea here is your brain receives incomplete information from the world and tries to complete that information, very often erroneously. What you see is not always what you get. A lot of reality that you take for granted is an inference. It's your brain's best guess from the limited information it's able to process. And I think that is what Brain Games teaches you. It teaches you about the most complicated object in the universe, which is your brain, and it does so in a way that's fun, that the kids are loving, that the parents are loving. You know, we had the highest rated new series premiere in the history of National Geographic in the US, and it's rolling out in 100 countries in September. So it's you know, I think science is the new sexy. I think brain is the new sexy. I think having a platform in a kind of mainstream outlet like Nat Geo is obviously an honor because it allows me to get cool ideas out there that are very, very accessible in a very, very sort of large audience capacity, which is good for me because, you know, you've seen my videos online. They're a little bit out there and intense. Maybe not for everyone. I think for everyone, but maybe not always for everyone. Yeah. So it's good to have a bigger platform like Nat Geo and do something that's, you know, a little more accessible.
Obviously influenced by Carl Sagan. Did you watch the Cosmos series when you were growing up?
I'm obsessed with him, you know. Yeah. I recently... I discovered, again, a remix mashup series on the web called the Sagan series that actually a friend of mine put together that takes Carl Sagan monologues and mashes them up with like NASA stock footage.
Oh, I've seen that. But the Blue Marble one is very well known, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, they're exquisite. And what I love about Sagan is he was a true philosopher, and he has this reverential way of awing, at marveling. So when he speaks, you feel like he's having kind of the philosophical equivalent of an orgasm, if there was such a thing.
You remind me of Carl in that respect.
Well, yeah, I relate to him. I do, man. I feel it when he speaks. I feel it. You know, the content, that kind of content. You know, the way that he pontificates is the kind of stuff that gives me the goosebumps. It's that kind of like, it's sci-fi. It has that sci-fi metaphysical thing. Even though it's science, it's that presentation style that makes the hairs in the back of your neck stand up, you know?
Yeah,
which I love.
I agree.
That's the best drug in the world, man.
I think a lot of people were very influenced by Cosmos. You celebrate brains. You celebrate smart.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also doing well, you've seen my philosophical espresso shot videos, but yes. That's a cool name, right?
It's a great name.
I partnered with a company called Revision 3, which is a great online video production company, to step up my online videos. So I have Brain Games and Nat Geo as my main TV platform, but then I'm continuing to do my shorts online, but with the resources of Revision 3. And the new series with them is called Shots of Awe.
I love that name. I just love that name.
Dude, if you go to youtube.com/Shots of Awe and subscribe, you can check them out. As a matter of fact, I would love it if you show the first video. It's called Awe.
I will do that right now. I am.
Yeah. I think you're gonna love it, dude.
Yeah. Let me here. Let's go to the YouTube.
It's the one that says
Shots of Awe on the Test Tube Network. Shots of Awe is a series of interviews building on.
That's the tease, right? Which video do you want to show?
Yeah, eyeball.
Eyeball. Awe. The one that says awe.
Yeah, that one.
See that second one down on the left there? Yeah. Let's watch it. Revision 3 won't mind if we play this.
They'll be thrilled.
So I think a lot about the contrast between banality and wonder, between disengagement and radiant ecstasy, between being unaffected by the here and now and being absolutely ravished emotionally by it. And I think one of the problems for human beings is mental habits. Once we create a comfort zone, we rarely step outside of that comfort zone. But the consequence of that is a phenomenon known as hedonic adaptation. Overstimulation to the same kind of thing, the same stimuli again and again and again, renders said stimuli invisible. Your brain has already mapped it in its own head, and you no longer literally have to be engaged by that. We have eyes yet see not, ears that hear not, and hearts that neither feel nor understand. There's a great book called The Wondering Brain that says that one of the ways that we elicit wonder is by scrambling the self temporarily so that the world can seep in. You know, Henry Miller says even a blade of grass, when given proper attention, becomes an infinitely magnificent world in itself, you know. Darwin said attention, if sudden and close, graduates into surprise, and this into astonishment, and this into stupefied amazement. That's what rapture is. That's what illumination is. That's what that sort of infinite comprehending awe that human beings love so much. And so how do we do that? How do we mess with our perceptual apparatus in order to have the kind of emotional and aesthetic experience from life that we render most meaningful? Because we all know those moments are there. Those are the moments that would make Final Cut. Only in these moments we experience afresh the hardly bearable ecstasy of direct energy exploding on our nerve endings. This is the rhapsodic, ecstatic bursting forth of awe that expands our perceptual parameters beyond all previous limits. And we literally have to reconfigure our mental models of the world in order to assimilate the beauty of that download. That is what it means to be inspired. The Greek root of the term means to breathe in, to take it in. We fit the universe through our brains and it comes out in the form of nothing less than poetry. We have a responsibility to awe.
That's nice. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to Shots of Awe, A-W-E.
Right.
And somebody in the chat room said, reminds me of Carl Sagan if you took all 13 episodes and put it in 30 seconds.
Yeah, totally. I mean, but you know why that works for today is because we live in an age where if you don't have ADD, you're not paying attention.
That's
I mean,
true.
I think that one of the, and again, I'm very pro-technology, but I also acknowledge that the only thing that's in the way of constant enlightenment is constant
Silva here.
distraction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, the only thing that's in the way of constant inspiration is constant distraction.
Right.
And that's, I think, you know, the always on, our phone is vibrating, we have 3 tabs and 3 tweets and Facebook and everything is open at once. And it makes us feel, as Douglas Rushkoff writes about, digiphrenic.
Right.
And the bandwidth anxiety and the cognitive fatigue that comes from the constant interruptions, you know, it makes it difficult to have the rich downloads that, you know, that like when you read an amazing book or when you watch an amazing film. I mean, for me, going to the movies is like a religious experience. You know, I turn everything off. I'm there. I want it to get in there. And then later I want to tweet about it, obviously, you know. But So the reason I make these videos so short, the shots of awe, is because at least I'm not asking people for too much of their time, but hopefully it's enough to jolt them into like, holy crap, let me turn everything off. Let me watch this again. Maybe let me go watch Cosmos. You know what I mean? So, anyway.
You know, there's a trend among a lot of the digerati that I know. All of a sudden, it's just emerged in the last few months of meditating. And maybe a lot of them have done this in private and just now are saying, oh, it's okay to talk about it. But I'm more and more of people I meet are saying, yeah, you know what I do? 20 minutes a day, I just stop.
Yeah.
Do you do that?
My mom does that. My mom is a huge meditator. She has been her whole life. And, you know, she does creative visualization and meditation. And she always tells me that I need to do more of that.
She's saying, Jason, slow down. You're going to burn out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in that because I'm interested in altered states of consciousness. I'm interested in subjectivity. One of my biggest things that I've geeking out on lately is the idea of experience design. There's a great essay by this guy called Eric Davis, who actually wrote the book Technosis, which I recommend to everyone. But he wrote this essay on experience design and the design of experience. And he basically says that as we come to understand the neurochemistry of lived experience, right, how consciousness emerges in the brain, we can learn to modulate and shape that interiority. In other words, subjectivity becomes the new canvas for the artist because the artist is becoming better and better and better at eliciting the kind of subjective responses and occasioning the kind of subjective responses that he wants out of the subjects that are consuming his art. So directors are getting better at making us feel certain ways when we watch movies. But we can also get better at creating these subjective experiences in our day-to-day lives. And I think that's just fascinating for me because I think altered states of consciousness are where that's all about, you know, whether it's people that have been doing psychedelics or people that, you know, like to drink alcohol to celebrate a festive occasion or people that like to smoke a joint before they watch movies. These people know how to modulate and tweak their perceptual apparatus to have the subjective experience that they want.
We're talking to Jason Silva. He's the host of Brain Games on the National Geographic Channel. Season 2 is about to begin, just completed the first season, and you could find it all at braingames.nationalgeographic.com. We'll have more with Jason in just a second. Our show today brought to you by Audible.com. If you want to feed your brain with ideas, audiobooks are one of the best ways to do it because you've got lots of downtime, unfortunately, in your life, commuting, the gym, housework, walking the dog, when you could be listening, learning, expanding, and growing. And that's one of the things I love about Audible.com, whether it's fiction, nonfiction. I see Julian Assange has a new book called Cypherpunks, Freedom and Future on the Internet. This just came out. I'm going to have to put that on my Audible wish list. I'll tell you how you can get a free book right now. Great way to kind of see if Audible is for you. Visit audiblepodcast.com/triangulation, the name of the show. audiblepodcast.com/triangulation. You'll be signing up for the Gold account. That's a subscription, book a month subscription. First month is free. First 30 days are free. Your first credit is free. Cancel anytime in the first 30 days. You pay nothing, but that book will be yours to keep. And by the way, one of the things I love about subscriptions, you also get a daily New York Times or Wall Street Journal audio synopsis, which is a really great way to stay up on what's going on in the world around us. I see a new novel from Carl Hiaasen. I love his stuff. He hasn't written a book in 3 years. Bad Monkey is now out. Artie Johnson. Do you know who Artie Johnson is? Very interesting. The comedian from Laugh-In, he narrates this. I gotta hear this.
Oh, wow.
I can't even imagine what this would sound like. But Hiaasen is hysterical. Many of his books have been turned into movies. He's
Striptease, right?
Striptease, you got it.
I used to love Demi Moore when I was younger.
He writes from South Florida, and of course it's full of wackos and crazies and interesting people, and of course the best crooks. Whoops, that's Brain Games. Let's go back to Bad Monkey. This is one. I mean, my point is that you've got 100,000 plus titles to choose from, and the first one is free. So good luck picking. audiblepodcast.com/triangulation. And in a busy world, there's nothing like having an audiobook to listen to. I just finished The Great Gatsby because I saw the Baz Luhrmann movie, and I was thinking,
did you love it?
Well, I was surprised. I really liked the Baz Luhrmann movie. I thought, boy, how close is this to the original? I read it, in high school probably.
Yeah.
It's page for page identical.
Yeah.
Which is not what I expect from Baz Luhrmann.
I thought it was hallucinatory.
It was
I thought
beautiful.
the film was just gorgeous to look at. And
yeah,
my favorite scene was the scene where he finally like gets to the date with the girl, and then he's throwing all his shirts at her, and then they go swimming, and it's just like this kind of lucid dream fantasy. His love affair becomes like a pop song, and it's just like, oh my God, it's just amazing.
It's the jazz age updated for the hip hop age, but which I was a little nervous about, but in fact, it works
it was so
really
it was
well.
so interesting, right? Yeah, I totally thought it was very inventive the way they did that.
Jason, we're gonna call you back because your Skype has frozen, so. Which is fine. Okay. It's a great shot of you, but I think we'd like to see your lips move. So hang on,
do it.
Hang on just a second. We'll hang up and we'll call you right back.
Okay.
We're talking to Jason Silva. He is the host of National Geographic's Brain Games. And by the way, if you go to braingames.nationalgeographic.com, you saw the challenge, which is really, I failed miserably. All 3 answers I got wrong. But there are these great brain challenges. How closely do you pay attention? Test yourself on your ability to focus. What scares you and why? I've not seen this series, but I'm going to have to watch it. And by the way, the one I took, I won the award, and I could buy a T-shirt that says, "I wouldn't know 3D if it hit me in the eye," which is probably true. These are fun, a lot of fun.
Yeah, people should watch it. It's 9 p.m. Monday nights at 9 p.m. on National Geographic Channel.
I will watch it.
If people are in the UK, it's at 8 p.m. in the UK Monday nights as well.
We have to do the. We're getting the video, so let's wait till we get the video before I ask him a question.
How's it going?
Sorry about that. We had to reboot Windows. What a shock.
All right.
We can be at the peak of evolutionary goodness, but we still have to reboot Windows.
Yeah, I know. I hear you, man. I hear you. You know, it's like we're still limited by hardware.
Yeah.
The hardware is still not as big as our imagination. I mean, it's getting there.
I can't wait to the singularity. When do you think the singularity will be here?
Well, think about it. Think about it. You know, the emergence of language was a singularity. That was the first singularity. That allowed us to encode information, transmit that information through time and space from mind to mind. That the world post-language would have been inconceivable to early hominids on the other side of that line. You know, Kevin Kelly writes about that in What Technology Wants. He says that language was really the first singularity, so to speak. Yes. You know, and you could argue that the Industrial Revolution was kind of like a singularity because it allowed us to transcend the limits of our muscles for the first time. And then the Digital Revolution is ushering in the path to this next singularity because with the Digital Revolution, we transcend the limits of our minds. I think what we got to get to, though, is we got to create a non-biological mind that is not bound by the hardware limitations of our biology.
I agree.
So a digital mind that can upgrade itself without a hitch will be like a self-engineering, you know, God, so to speak.
Yeah, that's what Ray talks about, really.
Ray Kurzweil and Kevin Kelly says, you know, who wouldn't want to be? He says, I can't think of anything more fun than being a god, is what he kind of says. You know, I know that may sound heretical.
But we are as gods. I mean, come on.
And we are world builders.
Yeah.
That is what we are. Right now, you and I are using technologically mediated telepathy to communicate.
Isn't that amazing?
I am in New York. You're in California. I'm staring at a screen, and you could hear my thoughts
at the speed of light.
Yes, right now. This is a technosocial wormhole, is the term Amber Case uses. That's what this is. It's like in the movies, in a folding time space. Like we're creating a fold in time and space that allows you to see me and me to see you through this portal.
But you know what happens, and
we just don't use those terms.
This is what people who moralize say. When you start, as soon as you start thinking you're a god, hubris, God will strike you down. Is there a risk at thinking we're gods?
You know, only if we use those powers to hurt ourselves.
For evil,
so, you know, I suppose that technology has always been a double-edged sword. You can use fire to cook your food or to burn your enemy, right? So
right.
It's not the technology, it's how we use the technology. And to that end, we use the technology of culture. We use cultural technologies to create an operating system of a set of values and a set of checks and balances for ourselves, a kind of moral software that we all are running on. You know, I think that the average person knows that killing is bad, and the average person knows that stealing is not good. And Most people don't feel that they've been brainwashed to believe that. I mean, I think it feels intrinsic, but nonetheless, that is kind of a cultural technology that's been like imbibed in us, and I think that's okay. And I think we need to create good ones. You know, we need to maintain narratives that inspire people, that inform people how to use these technologies in ways that are positive and uplifting.
And religion was a primitive way to do that.
Of course it was.
That was the whole point.
The original intention of religion was that. It was, you know, it was a technology meant to give people hope and make people love each other, at least in its best case manifestation. It was about love and generosity and taking care of the poor and taking care of the sick. I mean, it was a cultural operating system, as McKenna would say. But, you know, it got corrupted, and it was used to control people also. And, you know, again, always been a double-edged sword, right?
Yep.
Always been a double-edged sword. So you know, you go ahead. Sorry.
Jason, how much acid have you taken?
Oh, I have never done LSD, believe it or not.
You don't need to, dude. I can tell you right now. Having taken a little bit in my time, you're there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've
You're quoting Terence McKenna, who is kind of.
Let me put it this way. I support marijuana legalization.
Okay.
I've been writing articles about pot legalization and the freedom to explore one's consciousness since I wrote for my high school newspaper. You know, I think it was Abraham Lincoln said prohibition goes beyond the bounds of reason because it attempts to make a crime out of things that are not crime and trying to legislate a man's appetite. You can't legislate a man's appetite. If you're not hurting anybody else, you should be able to probe the perimeters of your own consciousness without anybody messing with you. And whether you do that through fasting or dancing or f***ing or drugs, you know, whatever floats your boat, you know, like I guess if you're not hurting anybody else, I think the only cardinal rule here is be kind to others, and then, you know, go nuts, explore, you know, probe the perimeters of yourself.
Jason, I feel like I would love to hang with you, but it would be exhausting. Do you ever slow down?
Yes. I mean, yes. Let's go to the movies. I like to chill. I like to have a couple of cocktails. You know, my favorite drink is the Moscow Mule. Have you ever had a Moscow Mule?
What's a Moscow Mule?
Moscow Mule is, I think it's vodka with like really strong, like ginger beer with like that strong kick, that ginger beer, and a little bit of lime juice. And
we have Liz Romero, who's one of our staffers, and bounces on a large rubber ball all day without stop. Is a very big, apparently, because she's cheering, Moscow Mule fan.
Oh, there you go. Cool. But look, I think intoxicants, we've had relationships with intoxicants since the beginning.
That's Terence McKenna's premise, isn't it?
Yeah, not just Terence, but there's a psychopharmacologist called Ronald Siegel who wrote a book called Intoxication, Life in Pursuit of Artificial Paradise. And he says that the desire to alter our consciousness is as natural as the desire to have sex, as natural as the desire to eat. He calls it the fourth drive. And, you know, I think America is coming around to that. You know, I think that there was a recent Gallup poll, or the first national poll, that said that over 50% of Americans, I think it was like 53 or 54% of Americans, now support marijuana legalization. I think that's a huge page turner for this country. You know, there's all these studies now. The government is now putting money into studying how ecstasy, MDMA, can be used to treat PTSD. You know, they're doing psilocybin mushroom stuff for people who have terminal cancer to, like, maybe, you know, deal with their own death through this kind of transpersonal experience that it seems to be able to elicit. And of course, you know, cannabis, you know, in California, so many creative people, all the poets, all the artists, all the screenwriters, so many brilliant people that, you know, that attribute, you know, the responsible and intellectual use of marijuana to some of the greatest insights I've ever had. Even our boy Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan wrote a magnificent essay about marijuana under the pseudonym Mr. X.
No kidding.
That he later came out and publicly said, I wrote that essay.
Awesome.
And his wife is on the board of Normal.
No, you talk about the first singularity, an early singularity, being the discovery of language. I wonder, you know, Leonard Shane writes about the Cambrian
physics.
Yeah, and the Cambrian explosion, and saying that really the realization that we were going to die was the thing that made us human, and caused this great creative explosion, because suddenly, unlike animals, we knew this was going to end.
Yeah, look, Ernest Becker, the Pulitzer Prize-winning book *Denial of Death*, is the book that Woody Allen gives Annie Hall in the movie Annie Hall to explain his worldview. Yeah. And it basically says that our extended cognitive awareness of our own mortality it drives us mad, and that we've come up with these three solutions or illusions to deal with this mortal issue. And of course, the three solutions to the problem of death are the religious solution, which provided a narrative of an afterlife and took care of the psychological needs in the face of death with that story. Of course, secular men and women can't do the religious solution anymore. So there's been these other two. There's the romantic solution. This is a really interesting one. That says we turn our lovers into deities. We turn our lovers into gods and goddesses. She's like the wind. She's my salvation.
Right.
She is the sun. That's why every pop song and every movie,
right.
we turn these people into gods, and then we feel that by rubbing up against the divine, we're going to be saved. But ultimately,
then we find out they have feet of clay, and the whole thing, boom.
You got it. So you know Ernest Becker. And then the last one is the creative solution to the problem of death, and that one is the one in which we create tools, we create art, we create things in the world
to survive us.
Yes, it will that poetically survive us.
Right.
But here I think there's even a fourth one. Because I think, yes, it's great to create art and poetry as the creative solution to the death problem. But what about technology and engineering?
Mm-hmm.
What about the fact that like vaccines and biotechnology, and we've doubled the human lifespan? What if like there's this other version of the creative solution to the problem of death, which literalizes this, this anxiety and an engineering approach to solving this anxiety, which is let's find medicine, let's create medical breakthroughs, let's find ways of alleviating suffering. Let's use this creative capacity to actually extend our lives.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. By the way, Becker's book is on audible.com. I should mention this. We were talking about audiobooks. You can get this one for free. Maybe this would be a good first pick on audible.com.
I think everybody should read this book. Every human being, every thinking human being should read this book.
Good enough for Annie Hall and Woody Allen. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, I have another video. Would you like to show another video?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one that's actually about mortality and creativity as a response to mortality. It's in the youtube.com/shots of awe, and it's called Mortality.
All right, John's gonna pull up youtube.com/shots of awe. I'm really thrilled that our friends at Revision 3 are working on this with you, and this is Jason Silva on Mortality.
You're gonna love this one.
Well, I think my opinion on grief can be summed up in the words of Alan Harrington from The Immortalist when he says, "Any philosophy that accepts death must itself be considered dead. Its questions meaningless, its consolations worn out." I agree with him. I don't think there's any way to make peace with death, with mortality, with the human condition. The fact that we can ponder the infinite cosmos, yet we're ultimately food for worms, I find heart-wrenchingly paralyzing, depressing, sad beyond all measurable limits. The idea that everything and everyone you love is going to be taken away from you is unacceptable to me. I think it's just unacceptable being okay with those terms imposed on us by said universe. If the cosmos is comfortable with entropy, that's one thing. It doesn't mean I have to be comfortable with entropy. In fact, I'm a member of the kingdom of life, and life is anti-entropic. Life moves towards greater complexity and organization. As Kurzweil says, more knowledge, more science, more, sprouting possibilities. And some people say that maybe death is an evolutionary design, meant to get rid of the old in order to make room for the new. And that may have been a stepping stone, a necessary rehearsal, a way of spreading the diversity of information. Sex and death, genes mixed together, create something new, kill off the old shells. But what if we're able to create new rules? What if we master biotechnology? We create software that writes its own hardware. We start to change the rules of life. We start creating that diversity. We start to be the sort of mind at work here. It would be intelligent design at last. But the point being, death would no longer be necessary. And we could create a world without loss and without those encounters with grief. And that may sound like a sort of manic fantasy of sorts, but I think that that's what mankind has always done through his art, is articulate his desire to be eternal, to be infinite. Even Manuel de Unamuno wrote, "Nothing is real that is not eternal." That is why we write poetry and we build cathedrals that try to create transcendence as a topographical statement. That's why we eternalize beatific moments and make gorgeous statues and write amazing songs. We long to eternalize ourselves. We want to say, as Alain de Botton said, we want to carve our names. We want to say, I was here, I exist, I felt something, and I matter, and we matter. And that's why death has become an imposition on the human race and is no longer acceptable, in my words.
Love it. Love it.
Thanks, man. Thanks,
Although,
dude.
I mean, honestly, we're all going to die no matter what. You can rage against the dying of the light, but it's going to happen.
Well, I think we must rage nonetheless, man. There is poetry. There is poetry in the rage. There is poetry in affirming ourselves, in hugging and kissing and loving each other, and in creating. I mean, again, it's a response to an indignity of the cosmos that I just do not accept. I love
cosmos.
I love too much to accept.
I love it.
Mortality, man.
Do you? Let me ask you about how are these ad-libbed? Do you write them out ahead of time? Are they essays?
No,
they feel like poetry. They feel like slam poetry.
Yeah, they're stream of consciousness, man.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in Venezuela, but I was born I grew up bilingual. My mom is actually a high school English teacher. She teaches literature, and I was always a voracious reader and a lover of ideas. And my thing was always, if I'm excited, if you engage me, or if the idea engages me, it's a way of reveling in it, I think.
Yeah.
So I think I was hanging out with Jodie Foster last summer at TED Global, and she called me an obsessive ruminator. And I thought that was the obsessive rumination. It's just you're just going on. And I think if you don't find an outlet for it, you can go nuts. But I think for me, my love of video, just like a writer with his voice recorder. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a writer. I'm an ecstatic poet. I get excited and I go in these stream of consciousnesses. It just so happens that instead of just recording my voice and then writing it down, I just recorded the video.
But I love that. I mean, just as you said, Van Gogh, had we not invented painting, what would he have done? You came at the right time. We had invented this medium, and there's YouTube, and suddenly what you do can happen.
Right. It can become an art form. It can become an art form that I've created based on the tools of the time. And it's interesting because, you know, when you're little and they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or even the fact that I studied film and philosophy, did that mean that I was going to go do, you know, normal movies with 120-page scripts and the regular rules of cinema? I mean, I could have. I love those. But I also felt like, yeah, there's this new technology called online video streaming, and the tools for capturing video are cheaper, and the attention spans of people are smaller. So why can't I just create a whole new format or style based on these new frameworks? And that's what I did with the espresso shots, and now they're like my signature thing, you know?
So tell me, so you got out of college, you were a philosophy major. What happened next?
Yeah, I got hired by Current, Al Gore's cable station.
Oh, yeah.
They were launching in 2004 when I was graduating, and I submitted a 14-minute documentary that I made with a buddy of mine, and it was about transcendence and hedonism. And the head of programming, David Newman, he loved the movie, and he was like, these guys are crazy, man. He gave me a call, and he was like, hey, do you want to work for Current? I was like, sure, you know? And I moved directly from University of Miami to Los Angeles, met Al Gore, and was hosting a show on Current when they debuted the network in 2005.
Neat.
Can you believe it?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Thank God that existed.
Right?
And I say it in past tense because it's gone now. So is your family still in Venezuela?
You know, my dad is still there. My parents are divorced. My brother lives in Miami. My mom she was living in New York City for a while, but now she's teaching abroad at the International School of Dominican Republic.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because you have a little bit of a New York accent, I would venture to guess.
Oh, interesting. Well, my grandma's originally from New Jersey, actually.
Oh, Jersey. Okay.
Yeah, she was born in New Jersey to a Russian-Polish family or Russian-Austrian family. But then she moved to Venezuela because my grandfather was in the textile business down there, and he swept her off her feet and moved her there. So the whole story.
Wow. And you moved to the family moved to Miami first? Is that where you?
Not the family. Just me and my brother. We went to the international high school in Venezuela, and when we graduated, we went to university in the States.
Awesome. Jason, it really has been a pleasure meeting you. Now I've got a new YouTube channel to watch, Shots of Awe, youtube.com.
Every week we release new videos on it.
Unbelievable.
Every Tuesday.
And they're beautiful. I mean, they're really beautiful. Somebody's putting a lot of work. I mean, you've got these great thoughts and this great message in what is essentially poetic, you know, just stream of consciousness poetry.
Totally.
And then beautiful images. So, wow, just amazing. I think you've created a new art form, really.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, I can't think anything even remotely like this.
Right. Well, it's literally, dude, it comes exactly from a place, the control freak in me wants to bottle inspiration. It has to do, again, with the death thing. I refuse to accept the impermanence of inspiration itself, that it's fleeting, that it comes and goes. And so the ecstatic poets wrote it down. I am doing the equivalent of writing it down for the YouTube generation.
You're the William Blake of the YouTube generation.
Thank you, man. Wow. Will you tweet one of my videos or any of those shots of Oz?
I will. I'll help you. I'll help you out. And somebody's asking, yeah, and it looked to me like some Shutterstock in the video in there. I think they're using.
Also,
yeah.
I'm friends with Shutterstock people. Hey, they hooked me up with all the stuff for radical openness. I'm very good friends with them. Big shout out to Shutterstock. Pond 5 also are collaborators with me. They've been fabulous.
Two of our sponsors, so that's really great. Good people.
Great, yeah. Pond 5, Shutterstock. And then, of course, for Revision 3, we have access to a whole big library from them. And, of course, the Nat Geo stuff, they have a huge library, too. So
that's great.
Everybody I'm working with is wonderful.
At braingames.nationalgeographic.com, when does the next season begin?
So we start recording the next season in September, it's looking like, and it'll probably come out early next year. But, they'll be doing reruns of season 1. So there's one more episode next Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern on Nat Geo, and then it's going to continue re-airing for the next couple months, and then globally in 100 countries starting in September.
How exciting.
Yeah.
A must-watch. A good family watch, actually. Bring the kids and watch it. Get them excited, because this is their world. They're growing up in this world.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, man. It was awesome. And send me a copy of this when it's done so I can tweet it as well.
I will make sure, and it will be on the internet as well. Thank you, Jason. Jason Silva.
So
at Jason Silva, braingames.natgeo.com. That's it for Triangulation for this week. We always make these shows available often. You watch live, and I love it if you do. It's usually about 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That would be 2300 UTC on twit.tv. If you can't watch live, love having the chat room there. Your questions, your thoughts really inform what we end up doing in these interviews. But if you can't watch live, always on-demand versions available, audio and video after the fact. twit.tv/TRI, or you can subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/triangulation, or you can get it via your favorite podcatcher, iTunes, that kind of thing. Thanks for being here. And next week, by the way, on Triangulation, we were talking about these do-it-yourself, this Kickstarter project for the do-it-yourself space telescope. We're going to be talking about that with Planetary Ventures. That's going to be very interesting. If you want to know about this Kickstarter project, tune in then. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Triangulation.